Now,
Oh, yeah.
now that I see you.
Yeah, we've met.
Yes, hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
And I'm not going to go all the way around because it'll take too long. Good to see you.
Yeah. Most of the people that you'll see their names and recognize their names here.
Yep, I do.
And we have present some of our newly elected trustees as well as some people from the existing board.
Okay.
So we have approximately 55 minutes to, 55 minutes for the interview, Mary. And,
Okay.
we got a clock on both ends, so I will alert you at the time that there's 15 minutes remaining.
All right.
And so I will be asking you the questions, and if there's any...
Gina will be doing it.
Pardon?
Gina.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Either way is fine, whatever you prefer.
Okay,
Okay, I'll take it from here.
okay.
So, Dr. Retterer, can you explain how you see the role of interim chancellor, please?
It's an interesting and a challenging role. The chancellor being the CEO of the district, and especially in this case because Jonah's been here a long time. People out there in the trenches, the people that work in the colleges, the faculty, even the students, the staff, when you see the leader retiring and leaving, and it's a gap, it's a temporary gap, there's a couple of things that can happen. One, people can feel very insecure. What's the new person going to be like? Will I still have a job? You know, things like that go through their mind, and you've got to keep peace in the family because everything has to continue. So I see it as being someone that keeps the peace, but also you don't want a void to happen, like the problems they have down in the south with those big holes that come in the ground because they have water issues underneath and everything. Sinkhole, I think they call them. Mm-hmm. You have something like that, and it starts sucking in people, ideas, progress, and you don't want that to stop. I'm so amazed at this building and looking around because none of this, you hadn't even broken ground on this when I was here before. And we need to keep the momentum, we need to keep the faith, and we need to keep the stability. And I see that as being the biggest thing. I don't want to go about making huge changes because I'm not here to see them through. But I want people to say, gee, this is good. We're staying together, we're making progress. This is stable. It should remain very, very stable. And I think that's a key piece for an interim because it's not up to me to make major changes. I don't have the vision for the next chancellor. I only have the vision, if you will, or skill or ideas to keep stability. I've done a lot of interims. I've always looked on interims as having three possibilities of goals. You can, if you already have a good situation, you can say, keep it up. That's how I see this one. I have another friend who does interims, and he loves to come into a mess. And the second kind it could be is clean it up. He loves it. He loves to clean up a mess. And he comes in and he does. And the other one might be you're good, but you've got to get things to a higher level, so they ask you to kick it up. And I think you're pretty kicked up here. And I had a wonderful time when I did the MJC interim. But I have seen other leaders that do any of those well. I think right now, to me, you were on a keep it up because you don't want to take a chance of backsliding in 6 months, and you could. So that's kind of the way I see it.
We have an accreditation site visit coming up in fall 2017 as a multi-college district involving both colleges.
Okay.
Tell us about your experience with accreditation and what you would do as a chancellor to lead the charge.
Okay. And when is that visit? Is that fall?
It's in the fall, but the preparation is underway
today
and through the summer.
Absolutely, absolutely. I remember when I came in January, the end of January, to be the interim at MJC, the first faculty senate meeting that I went to, which was about my third day on the job, my assistant came all the way down. She said, "There's a telephone call for you that you need to take. It's from the head of the accrediting society." I thought, oh, wonderful. This is going to be just great because they'd had the visit, I guess, in the fall, And this was the 90-day come, and she says, I need to tell you this personally, we're putting you on probation. Oh, great. On my third or fourth day on the job. And I thought, well, we certainly have work to do. And I remember that sinking feeling of, oh, terrific. So, you know, get the bad news out of the way first. From everything I've heard, that college is in much better shape accreditation-wise than it was. And I don't know a lot about Columbia's situation. But I know that working on that self-study and anything else that needs fixing or tweaking has to be done right now. It's extremely important. And the last thing you want are sanctions of any kind, because that's hard to get out around. It's hard to fix sanctions because they tend to always think that you're putting it under the table and you're still doing them. You know, that's part of it. I have been on steering committees for several accreditations. It's different in Minnesota and Arizona, and I spent 11 years in those two states. We had North Central, and they only come once every 10 years. So it's, yeah, it's real nice to be able to breathe for 9 years or whatever in between. But they're very thorough, but they don't come as often. I remember when I was in the faculty, I was on my first leadership team in San Bernardino for accreditation, and that was obviously California. I had no idea what it was, but I got on a team with a leader who was very familiar, and so I learned a whole lot from her at the time. And I've led it in other colleges. When I went to Shasta, I got there right before the self-study went out. And we had lots of, they didn't want me to edit it at all. And everybody wanted to say their nasty stuff in the self-study. That's the wrong place. You always have time when the team comes out, and they always have open hearings. If you have complaints, there will be private meetings. Anybody wants to state something, come into this meeting. I will be, or whoever it is, in that room for 2 hours. And they don't come, but they want to put it in writing anonymously so nobody knows who they are. Those things are hard to stop, you know. But when we had that accreditation visit, we had, I think it's recommendations or things you have to do or whatever, and they had suggestions. We had no recommendations. We had about 4 or 5 suggestions. And I thought, well, shoot, that's really good. These guys are better than they think they are. So that was one of the good things. And you have to be on it, and you have to have people on the campuses, the grassroots people doing it and empowering them to do it. One person can't do it. You can wave that flag and you can provide the motivation, but you can't do it for them. So that's where I feel on the accreditation, is making sure that it's happening, checking up on it, but empowering the people who have been nominated or elected or appointed to do that work and saying, you go for it, it's your job, not mine, and letting them do it.
Mary, could I ask you a
Sure.
question? And welcome back. Thank you to see you.
Good to see you, Mike.
Have you ever served as a team lead or a team
Accrediting
chair
team?
on the accreditation team where you go to other schools to review their?
No, I've been part of that leadership team, but I haven't been the team leader. I was training for that in North Central, and then I left and came back to California, and I participated in a couple of teams, but they already had leaders by the time they called me to participate. But I was the president representative, so to speak, on those teams.
Thank you.
And I've helped write their reports.
I have a real quick question.
Sure.
I remember when you were here, I just don't remember the year. Do you off the top of your head remember what year you were here?
2012. Just right about from this time until June, the end of June in 2012.
You were sanctioned and put on probation on
Yeah, that's when
February 12th, I think February of 2012.
Yeah, I came, I officially started, I think, February 1st, but I was here a couple of days ahead of that. And yeah, that's when we went through
remember
that.
that well.
Okay.
Mary, could you share your understanding of the president's relationship with the chancellor and differentiate between the responsibilities of the presidents and the chancellor?
Okay. Well, the presidents basically have one boss, and that's the chancellor. The chancellor has 7 bosses. And the chancellor reports to you all directly. The president reports to the chancellor, for one thing, on a reporting line. The best operations I have seen in my 35 or 6 years in community colleges have occurred where you hire good people in the first place, which is critical, and then you empower those people to get their job done. And I think that's extremely critical. If a president feels like they're being targeted or something, then they're going to be a lot less apt to do some of the things they ought to do because they're afraid there might be a ramification or something like that. So I really think you gotta get out of the way and let them do what they're supposed to do and be there as a resource. That said, I used to meet with my chancellor a couple times a month, and he was, especially in Tucson when Bob was there, he would come out and visit you on your campus because he liked to walk around with the president, and he walked around without the president. So, you know, people would tell him things that they wouldn't tell me, so to speak. And he'd come back and say, this is really working well, you know. And of course, when your enrollment goes up 15% in 3 years, something was working. And that was kind of cool. But I always liked him because he got out of the way and let me do my thing, but he also knew exactly what I was doing. And that's what I like to do, is know what's going on and help people do what they want to do. When I was at the East Campus in Tucson, I was there altogether about 6 years, and the East Campus was kind of on the outer edge of town toward the desert, and you know, it was kind of a place for years where they took the misfits and sent them. And they did. And we were kind of the dumping ground for some of the misfits. And enrollment had been flat for the past probably 5 or 6 years, 0.5%. You know, that's not going to get it. And when we looked around at the enrollment of that campus, after I got there, he says, your job is to grow this enrollment. I looked around, and there were very few young students. Very few. A lot of non-traditional, a lot of reentry. We had almost no student life. We had nothing to attract young students. And when I first got there, the student government came to me and said, we have something we want to do. And I got there in July, or no, I take it back. I got there September 1st. And so we're 2 months from Halloween. They said, we want to have a safe Halloween celebration here on campus and invite the local grade school kids up to 5th grade who are in this area. And we'll provide the candy. The students will donate it. Let's have some games. It's a safe place because some of those areas were not real good for kids to go trick-or-treating in. I said, I think that's a wonderful idea. So we got together. The faculty did this. They got their classes. The student clubs did this. And we had about, I think it was like about 175 kids there the first year. The last year I was there, it was so big it was being done in the mall, at the end of one of the malls that had vacant stores. By that time we had instituted a football team on the East Campus. And that football team was on its way to go to a bowl game. Yeah, and which they incidentally won. And that was only their 3rd year in existence. And we had 2,000 people at that mall. All the campuses in the district, there were 6 colleges that formed the district. They all were there on a booth. And it was a kind of a, which school can donate the most candy? Well, each kid went home with a pound of candy. We had 2,000 pounds of donated candy. And the young people heard this and they said, this is cool. We want to be part of a school where we get to do that. And it made the papers, and enrollment went up 15%. And, you know, the rest, as they say, is history. So it changed the face of that particular campus. I don't think that the colleges need all that much major change, but they need to keep up what they have and maybe have a new idea here and there. Do we have enough older students? What can we do to attract reentry or non-traditional students? Do we need to attract younger students? Things like that. What can you do to stand out and maybe make it a really cool place to be? And that's how I tried to look at it, is make it inviting, make it enhancing, make the students want to come to these events in this place. So that's kind of the way I see interacting with the presidents and helping them in their vision. I should be there to help them.
Please share your experience in working with an elected board, and how would you orient a new board? What is most critical?
What was the last one? What is most
What
critical?
is most critical
In orienting a
in
new board?
orienting a new board?
Well, one of the things with a new board that you have to have a good understanding of, and I've been out for 5 years, so I have to rehearse or get back into this, reorient myself, is what does accreditation, and we have our own accrediting group here in California, and they're a little different than some of the others. What does accreditation say are the duties of a board? So we have to comply with that, we have to work with that. And that's something I think is very important for new board members to understand. It's very important to understand their relationship with me, with the Chancellor, and how that relationship works. And I have to do that also, because I've been a CEO with a board, but I haven't been a Chancellor of a multi-college district yet. But I've done everything else and may as well try that. I think that's very important. And also the mechanics. How do you get things done? If you have an issue, who do you take it to? How do you accomplish your goals within the parameters of the laws and the rules and the regulations? And I think we have to make that as easy as possible, because the harder it is, the less is going to get done. And I don't believe in putting up barriers. I believe in greasing the skids for everything and making jobs and accomplishments easy to get done, and then making sure we log and know things that have happened. And I also believe that one of the things I always did with my board was I put out a memo on Friday on email, and I would recap the activities I had during the week, anything that happened, because I'm a strong believer in that no surprises deal. And this way the new board members would know to expect that right away, and it's a communication thing. And I would even put in things like that I attended a meeting with the student government group or things like that. It's just, what do you do during the week? I don't just sit here. I get out and I walk around a lot. So that kind of thing, making you aware of how this works, the fact that I am your employee and you are my bosses, and then if you want something done, I tell the other people and we get it done, and how that works.
Could you please provide examples of initiatives that you've developed or directly participated in that support student success?
Okay. One of the things we did, again, this was at Pima College on the East Campus. We had pretty good student success in a lot of ways, but we just didn't have, nobody had any energy. Nobody had any, this is a great place to be. It's like, yeah, it's there. Yeah, I can do this. That's not fun. So besides creating a football team, which was really interesting, the first registration season I was there was the end of August and September of 1998. And you'd go onto campus and people were registering for classes, and we're in Tucson, it's 105 degrees and humid. And the lines were out the door, around buildings, around up here. Anybody who would drive up and look at that would say, forget it. I mean, kids are standing out there and fanning themselves. And I'd go inside and look around, and the place where registration happened had a little window that was about as big as that TV screen. And that was it. And it was a little tiny room, that was way less than this room, about 20% the size of this room, with 2 or 3 chairs. And then the rest of them went out the window and out the door and around the building. And that's no way to be welcoming. So when I found out they had a bond measure and I was to help design the rebuilds on East Campus, we looked at how to streamline registration and all of the act of getting in. And one of the things that we wanted was a one-stop shop. And for that campus, the way the building was set up, it wasn't going to work. So instead of asking the administrators how to do this, I called the head registrar in and said, look, you've been doing this for 15 years. How can we streamline this? And we can move the building, we can change things, we can do whatever. And she took that so seriously. She had a schematic that she drew of exactly where she would completely change how the buildings and the lines worked. And we did. The library used to be here and there was student services here. We switched them completely, changed the way the floor plans worked, and students could come into one point and never leave that building when it's 105 outside. And we never had any more lines around the building. And one of my student leaders, an African-American lady who was just a nifty and creative gal, I don't know how she does it today. Her first name was Isis. It's not a name you ought to have today, but that's the name of an Egyptian goddess. So she had that name, and she was really interesting. And I talked to her one day. I said, what brought you to East Campus? She said, well, I pulled up 2 years ago, and I saw that line around the building, and I said, I can't possibly do that. I got back in my car and went home. She waited another year, and then she came in the year after we did the construction. She says, I drove up, and I saw no lines, and I thought, oh, this must be the right time. And she became the student body president, and she went on, I think, to Arizona State and got her bachelor's degree because she could do that. That was a stumbling block, and that's when our enrollment went up, when it was easy and smooth and pleasant, and you could go into one building and do it all in one place. Even the assessment testing, everything was in one place. So that's the kind of thing I led that made a huge difference for students in their ability to succeed.
What is your understanding of participatory governance?
Just what the word participatory means. It doesn't mean I get to do it alone. It doesn't mean this group gets to do it alone. And it doesn't mean anybody has to do what anybody else says. Because everybody who participates in that, I don't want to say has an axe to grind because it's not a negative